Assalamu alaikum. Topic is reverse engineering and innovation. Contributions to sciences and civilizations. In the beginning, I may clarify that this lecture is not about engineering, not about technology, and not even about any technical matter of sciences. I intend to take you through and expose to you or present to you some artifacts and milestones of achievements and the timeline of history. But in this journey, I'm not going to boast about any achievement. This is not the purpose. The purpose is to ultimately draw a lesson. That what is the lesson in this journey? In this, what lesson we can draw from this history museum, and then what we can do now. So the emphasis is on the lesson and what we can do now, but there is no but it's not the purpose to boast about anything. In this regard, we'll also see, because I've said that there can be many case studies of various people, various nations, various religions, various civilizations, but since we are dealing with or we are passing through or we are experiencing ourselves a certain thing. Therefore, I have limited my talk to the people with whom we are discussing. And here we'll also be referring to the Muslim contribution to science and civilizations. So this will be, in fact, the basis of taking a lesson. But the purpose is not to boast about it. What is reverse engineering? It is the exercise of reproduction of other inventors or innovators' invention in its details of composition and construction without inventing a new wheel. So here my emphasis will be on the point that when Muslims entered the competition, they did not try to invent a new wheel, but they went through this exercise, and I'll show this from certain facts as we will discuss further. So this is what I mean from reverse engineering. So it's not a technical matter which I'm going to discuss. And then what is innovation? It may involve creation, development, advancement, and application of invention, process, or the service for better advantage. This is what Muslims do. That once they were able to re-engineer, they were able to reverse the engineering process and they were able to re-engineer. They took a lesson, then they went for innovation. So it was in two steps, not in one step. And how it happened, we'll go through that, inshallah. What approach was adopted? The first thing, the first basis was learning, Iqra. The journey started with Iqra, and that was not only reading, not only literacy, not only tilawat, not only tartil, but it was all as a composite message, it was as a composite direction of learning. Just reading without learning has no meaning. So the first step was learning, and it started with Iqra. The next was libraries. They established libraries, and we'll see this through the history. Even if we go only by the dictation of Quran, Quran doesn't say that read only Quran. Quran is inviting to read Torah. It is inviting to read Injil. It is inviting to read the Suhuf of Ibrahim alayhi salam. It is inviting to read the Kitabun Mubin, the open book of the universe, written in mathematics, physics. It's inviting to read the books, not just one book. And it is there, one thing is very important. When the Quran refers to Torah, Torah is not just one book. Torah is a compendium of 5 books. And at many places Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that I have given book. And it consists many parchments, many sections, many segments. If we take only just one example, Allah doesn't say that you read the Injil of Matthew only, or read the Injil of John or Mark. When it says Injil, there are at least 24 canonical versions of Injil. But we confine ourselves to 4. Okay, but have we read those 4? We don't, we reject all these. For example, some people reject all, but have we read Barnabas' version, to which Muslims say that it is the version which is acceptable? If it is, then let us see that how many scholars or imams or the researchers have read Barnabas' version of Injil. Same is the case with Torah. Torah reproduced in Jerusalem or the one reproduced in Babylon. There are different versions. We don't even know about these things. And if we collect only these books, this becomes a library. But Muslims did not stop only with the religious or to the compendia of books of religion. No, they went further. And then the translations. It was a big movement in the Muslim world at that time that they went for translations. En bloc, en masse, hundreds and thousands of translations taking place in all the empires which were conquered, in Persian, in Sindhi, in Arabic, in all other languages of those areas, in Latin, in Spanish. And then came the time for innovation, and that happened through analysis, criticism, assimilation, and then the stage was ripe for innovation. The first stages were reverse engineering. Look into how the engine is built. They looked into their libraries, other libraries which were available even in the Mongol Empire. They looked into the observatories built by Halaku Khan. They went for translations. They went for through this process. And then another important thing, for example, today we say that the internet has broken the barriers of information movement. At that time, Muslims broke the physical barriers, the mental barriers, which were created. For example, Roman Empire had created a wall against itself. China has created a physical wall around itself. There was a wall around the Persian Empire. There were barriers. People could not move. People could not exchange views. People could not meet. People could not discuss. People could not exchange information. Muslims did networking across the oceans, across the continents, across the peninsula. And then there was free exchange of information without inhibition. There was no bar in discussing anything with a non-Muslim or with a Muslim. There was no inhibition, to the extent that people could speak their mind before the Prophet, peace be upon him. And Quran is a witness to that. Even ladies coming and discussing with the Prophet and taking a stand. And there are ayat about that. And there are cases in which the cases which the Prophet, peace be upon him, conducted, the ladies, the people taking a stand and speaking before the Prophet without inhibition. And in this process, the overall, the basic principle was that the sources of knowledge, whether they were Greek, Latin, Aramaic, or they were Persian, or they were Indian, the source of knowledge and sciences, whether created by the enemies like Mongols, were not treated as religious or non-religious. Science is neither religious nor it is non-religious. It is nature. They didn't treat it that way. And then Quran says that science, that seeking knowledge is obligatory. It's not just Iqra only. It is learning. And learning comes through knowledge, learning of knowledge, and then the wisdom comes through critical thinking through that knowledge. They went through this process, not just Iqra, that there is sabab in Iqra. And then Muslims did not reject sources of knowledge and study of lands, geography of Persia, geography of oceans. And wherever they came in contact with any people, they didn't treat it as un-Islamic, that it is un-Islamic to study the history of India, or Hindus, or non-Muslims. And then what they did about libraries, they established public and private libraries, for example, in Cordoba, in Baghdad, which were 400,000 books from old sources. And the history shows that they used to bring loads of camel loads of books from these empires. And they brought them to the Beit al-Hikmat, to the library, the central library in Baghdad, in Cordoba. And there, these books were opened, these books were read, these books were translated. And before the advent of Islam, these books were written. And all these books were written by the non-Muslims naturally. And all these books were not about Islam. No book was about Islam. All these books were about many sciences. And they created a library of hundreds of thousands of books brought from the non-Muslim world, on camels, on donkeys, on mules. This is how they established the libraries. People had their own personal libraries. Then the next phase was when they assimilated this knowledge, they made their own observations, they analyzed it, they conducted experiments, they went for translations. Philosophical and scientific works from Greek. If you read Ibn al-Arabi is, in fact, if you read Ibn al-Arabi, you will find that you must have read it, you will find that you must have found it, that you are reading Aristotle. Plato had great influence during the period of Mutazilites. When they came in contact with these civilizations, whether it was Greek, Syriac, Pahlavi, or Sanskrit, they all assimilated them, they translated them. This great movement of translation, beginning from 8th century and continuing for about a century, it brought treasures of knowledge. It spread the treasures of knowledge into the Muslim world. And then the Beit al-Hikmat, the house of wisdom, was established. They developed sciences. Further, based on what they had translated, analyzed, criticized, they didn't accept anything without skepticism. They criticized and assimilated. And it was after that they gave their own theories, and then they developed their own instrumentation. And what happened? How it happened? The scholarship which developed in the Muslim world, through that scholarship, they updated the available information. Where the Greek had left it with skepticism, but through Zan. It was only skepticism through Zan. They didn't go for observation and experimentation. They went for observation, they went for experimentation, they went for instrumentation, they created instruments. But how it happened, we'll go through that journey. Now it starts with the period of intensive period of reverse engineering. With movement into Syria, Egypt and Persian Empire, for example, Muslims came in contact with old centers of sciences During the mission, the battle of with the Jews in Khyber, during that mission, the Prophet, peace be upon him, sent a team of scholars, the team of researchers to Petra, to Roman Empire, to find the instruments, the tools, the apparatus, the ammunition, arms and ammunition which they are using, study them, not just buy them or bring them, study them, how it is made. And this movement continued at least till the Mysorean Empire, Hyder Ali, Tipu Sultan, that they were the first to invent the steel rocket. The movement started much early. Before Muslims took over, Greek was, they had developed centers. Romans had developed centers. Persians had developed centers in Alexandria, in at many other places. In history, they did not destroy any place of any research. They rather strengthened them. They took them further. And they developed those centers. They not only kept them intact, but they developed them further. For example, these are so many examples. I'll not go into these details. In the beginning, I said that it is not the idea to boast upon these achievements, but I'm just taking through the history to show that this was done and how it was done. How it was done. We'll go through this process. These were the centers. Important philosophical and scientific works of Aristotle and so many other scientists, they were rendered into Arabic. In other languages also, in local languages also. And Arabic became depository of wisdom and sciences and most important scientific language of the world for centuries. Through this process, Arabic became the language of sciences, language of research, as today English is. These are just examples. I'll not read them all, but I'll just expose to these examples that it was not only in one area that they did achieve anything, but it was in many areas, multiple things, all around the world. Astronomy. From where did they get this inspiration? If we look at these ayah, these are ayah from various surah, from different paras, from different chapters. They got the inspiration from here, how the night moves. Have you ever taken a group of 10 nights, studied the sky at that time? How the sheet of stars moves from the dusk to the dawn? What are different sections there? What are the constellations which you see there? What is the Shaf'a and Watr? What is the what is one night in one hemisphere and the day in the next hemisphere, in the other hemisphere, and the 2 nights Shaf'a when it completes 24 hours? Have you ever done that? At that time, the Muslims did it, and the result was it was not at one place. They did it at different places. They did it in Persia. They did it in Spain. They did it in Arabia. And they prepared at each place, at different places. In Cairo, for example, in Samarkand, they prepared themselves at each place different tables, different maps of stars in the sky. And then they were able to travel in the oceans at night. That what is the position of a star, a relative position, and in which direction they are moving. They developed all these things. Through inspiration, I've shown you the ayat. And they prepared the astronomical tables. Zij, it's called Zij. Before that, there were only Toledan tables, developed in Toledo. And these were used by Copernicus, Kepler and others, and this is how the modern science came out. But the bases were provided by observation, by experimentation, after getting inspiration from these statements in the Quran, which I have shown, and then they updated, they prepared the Toledan tables, which are still being used relative to fixed stars. Muslims established astronomical observatory as a scientific institution. It was not an amusement place, not just for amusement and for practical application. These things were institutionalized where students could come, they could study, researchers could come, study, and these were for practical applications. They developed instruments on that basis. I'll show that. For example, they developed the calendar at that time. They developed the astrolabe. They measured the diameter of the earth at that time. And in recognition of the services of Al-Farghani, today in this world, in modern history, the scientists have named a crater on the moon after Al-Farghani. They recognize that what he did in this field, he did it. These are some names. They developed spherical astronomy, applied it to the solution of astronomical problems. It was not knowledge for the sake of knowledge, knowledge for wisdom, and wisdom for the solution of problems, practical problems, to make ease for the people. They can travel, they can work, they can produce, they can satisfy the needs, they can produce economic goods. And Muslims integrated Greek and Indian mathematics. They gave zero to the mathematics. Indians did not have the denominator line which we draw between the as a denominator. They gave it. They integrated the Greek and Indian mathematics, algebra, geometry, so many things. We'll go ahead. I'm not reading these, I'm just exposing these things. These are just examples. Number theory, Latin translations. These books were translated then from Arabic. These were translated into Latin, and they became the basis of transfer of knowledge, transfer of technical know-how to Europe, to other worlds. This is an example of geometry, calculus, trigonometry by Al-Biruni, geography, all sciences, and these are names. This one is very important. They developed, they preached, they practiced the theory of life and history, the world view, as evolutionary movement, not static. Theory of life and history as evolutionary movement. This is the driving force. And if you want to study this, you must have studied, some of us at least, Ibn Khaldun's view of history. It is the evolutionary view of history as evolutionary movement, and then shift from arithmetic to algebra. It was a big shift brought by the Muslims. And it was on the basis of dynamism and progress. Natural history. Today we have completely given up natural history, as if there is no natural history. Without natural history, no people, no civilization can make any progress. Then look at medicine. Medicine, I think, is the area they have made one of the maximum contributions after astronomy. Ibn Sina was called the prince of physicians in the West. Canons of medicine are still being taught in Europe by Ibn Sina. What this shows, whatever we have discussed till now, that they had taken knowledge in its entirety. Knowledge is not just religious knowledge. Knowledge is not just one knowledge, one type of knowledge. All these types of knowledges combined together make a compendium. Knowledge was taken in its entirety, collectively, all these subjects. And each one of them was not only a theoretical scholar, but theoretical and physical scholar, not only in one subject, in mathematics, in geography, in so many sciences, medicine, all at a time, in its entirety. And even after that, the effect continued because of the momentum that was created. And Ibn Sina, as I said, is still being taught in the Western lands, in the Eastern lands. They are still being taught, but their names appear to be different. Even after Mongol invasion, after the destruction, it continued. This is all in the medicine. They created the mobile hospitals on camel caravans. Medicine combined, this is very important. Medicine combined hygiene, dietary considerations, and lifestyle all at a time. Treating the disease through dietary considerations. This was the Unani, we call it Unani, the Greek medicine. Lifestyle based on Quran, hygiene. Just an example of wuzu. Look at the movement of fingers when wuzu is performed. Cleaning all the contours of the ear. Whatever the dirt or the viruses, or whatever the bacteria or germs are collected, deposited during a period, in those contours and hidden, how you clean the contours of the ear at that time, just through the finger. And how do you clean the sinuses of nose and the throat, through the throat. These are examples of hygiene. You might, in one of the lectures, when this coronavirus started, that ultimately the solution lies through immunology. The immunology cannot be effective without hygiene. Ultimately, the world will come to that. Otherwise, these profit-making corporations, as they are recommending now, second dose after first, then they are recommending third dose after second dose, and now they are recommending that you have 2 doses of one company and 2 doses of another company. This commercial exploitation will continue. Although it is necessary to have the vaccination, very important, but the ultimate solution lies in the immunology and in the hygiene. But these were the things, and these were prescribed as preventive measures. I've given just one example of wuzu, and that was developed as hospital hygiene, not just personal hygiene. It went to second level, home hygiene, office hygiene. Hospital hygiene is a subject on which they produced a number of books. Then pharmacology, alchemia as a full subject, taking advantage of the knowledge which was already collected by the Alexandria and Chinese alchemy, calibration, optics. They have done a lot in the optics, botany, zoology, anatomy, physiology. Take any name and you find an author. You find a scientist. You find his instrument. You find his book. And when you read the modern sciences on that subject and you correlate, oh, this was the best which was provided by them. Geography. Millennial technologies were inherited in this process of reverse engineering. When they did the reverse engineering, they studied each and every book, every instrument, and they took it through the process of reverse engineering, because they inherited a cumulative experience of thousands of years of other people, Mesopotamia, Egypt, so many civilizations, old civilizations, and then they invented new technologies, new techniques. Natural history I've already mentioned. There is something very important. They combined architecture with technology and nature. And nature, and is missing here. In architecture, they combine technology with nature and art. I remember when Aga Khan Hospital was being built there, or some more hospitals were being built there, or even hotels were being built there. So from the government side, I was involved, and at that time, the architects were not only thinking of building the concrete structures, but they, if you look at the color, the stone they have used, and the work they have done, they correlated it with nature. Not only nature, but the local culture. You will find this local culture in the hotels wherever they are built, and the hospitals where they are built, wherever they are built. And they are in compatibility. They are compatible with nature. Harmony between man and nature, they recognized. Harmony between man and nature was the most important recognition of Muslims, that they were able to progress. This is how the stage was prepared for Renaissance. All these things were placed in the dish, in the disc, in the plate. We regressed, we withdrew, and Europe took it over. And they built it further. Civilization is nobody's monopoly. If somebody leaves it, some other person will take it over. Some other civilization will take it over. But we did it all. But we unboarded the bus. We stopped. Fateful philosophy. How it happened? Why we regressed? Ghazali has done a wonderful job. He has given us the modern theory of Islamic jurisprudence. Wonderful. Appreciated. But on the point of philosophy, on his one decision, because he was the chief instructor, head of the education department, you can say, in the Muslim Empire at that time, he stopped study, banned the study of philosophy. And we are still facing that, but the madrasas are not allowing that. And even now, Muslims are realizing, they are giving opinions. There are thousands of scholars you will find books on the subject. They say that the mental space now in the Muslim thought has been confined since the death of Ibn Rushd at the end of 12th century. At that time, Ibn Rushd was the most outstanding opponent of this policy. He wrote a book against him. Ghazali had written Tafatul Falsafa, and he wrote a refutation that book, against that book. Bertrand Russell says the influence of Ibn Rushd in Europe was very great. In one of the paintings I had shown, and the name of the painting is School of Athens, where Ibn Rushd has been included among the scholars of the West. What is the way forward in this situation? Can we renew Renaissance? Can we revitalize it? Can we revive it? People think of revivalism through so many other methods, but this is the way Muslims had progressed. They had brought it to the Renaissance, point of Renaissance. Then they regressed. Can we take it over? Can we renew it? In the meantime, a lot has passed. New information has come. Can we take it over? And we can take it over only through the journey I have pointed out, by learning. Go back to Iqra. by libraries, kutub, kitab, and translations from the point we stopped and the point of in 21st century. Lot of information has been produced. Lot of books have been produced. Lot of inventions have taken place. We have to see and study these through. We have to go through all of them. When we study any book on science, for example, you don't start with Einstein. You go back to Newton, and you don't start with Newton. You further go back. You go further, go back. If we can't do that, we can't reinvent the wheel. Go for translations, and then analyze, criticize, critical thinking, assimilate, and then innovate also by breaking all barriers, mental barriers, physical barriers, and create a networking with the entire world, irrespective of religion. Then exchange of information without inhibition. In our sphere, the exchange of information is not taking place, and there are inhibitions. There is fear. I can't speak. I'm not allowed to speak. And how it will happen? By not treating sources of knowledge and sciences as religious or non-religious. With this, I stop here. And I thank you very, very much for your patient listening. If there are any questions, I'll be very happy to learn more from you on this subject. Thank you very much for your kind, patient listening. Thank you very much. Now you can unmute yourself. You can unmute and speak.
Okay, Justice Shazad, assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Just to start the discussion here, you obviously Muslim in the beginning actually was in the phase of translations and translated everything. But after this, because you're talking about people like, the Sina and the Haytham and so on, those people came, like in 400 Hijrah. So they were building up actually in knowledge that already has been translated and coming up with new knowledge. So my question to you really is, are Muslims at that time was far smarter than the Muslim today? Because frankly, all of the knowledge now available to us, you said translation, we don't need translation. We all read English and people read German and people other. So all of the knowledge become in the finger of our tip. But is because we are lazy, or we just are not, frankly, or we are stupid, then the people in the past was far smarter than us? Because I think going back and trying to read, in fact, I don't think reading, we all educated, we all have people who studied, from elementary school to high school and so on, and all basic knowledge they have learned. But I think the issue to me is that the problem is with the universities and the research institution. You look at all of the Muslim world, that's not because of lack of people education or knowledge, but somehow our universities do not produce science, invention and other new knowledge, but basically they become like teacher, like advanced high school type. So I'm still missing something in your presentation, actually, that we have something fundamentally missing. And it is not going back and reading literature and reading other things and so on, because we all know the foundation and the basics. And most people who are in this, attending are studied, have PhDs from foreign universities and so on, but somehow we are not advancing the knowledge. Why?
Thank you very much for a very critical question. I think you have given a lot of information already in your observation. I will just try to limit myself to a very brief thing. We have lost inspiration, and then we are not, even in the universities, we are not producing any research. Our universities are only granting advancing degrees, but they are not making any research. These are two important things, that we have lost inspiration and we've lost research. And we have divided knowledge into religion and non-religion. That is why we are not making any progress. Then there is another important, you said that we are all educated, but my humble view is that we are looking at a big picture, Ummah, in the Muslim world. More than 50% people are not educated. Literacy rate, only literacy rate. Education is much higher thing, but I'm talking only of the literacy. They are ignorant. They are illiterate. These are figures. I'm not saying it just from my mind. And then what is the definition of literacy there? It's before you already know that. And then look at then comes the question of education. Now look at the number of the children, or even men and women, out of school, dropping every year. Every child in this world does not get admission into the school. They are out of school. They are not getting education. And the rate of the dropout is colossally high. These are some facts which we must recognize, that now in this background, whatever little number of universities is there, they are not doing research. They are only degree awarding institutions. They are earning money and giving degrees which are not recognized because they are not based on research. This is the problem.
Okay, just one other comment. I don't think actually the whole issue of literacy of the masses is a critical issue. Because if you look to the number of Jews in the world, they are about, what, 20 million people? You telling me there is not 20 million well-educated Muslim among the 1.5 billion? How many Nobel Prize? There is 20% of the Nobel Prize comes from the Jews. Where is the Muslims? There is something fundamentally wrong with our universities and research institutes. There is no single Islamic There is no single university in the whole Muslim world, in spite of the resources that we have, in spite of the money, in spite of this, that actually produce something that can be recognized as a world university, as a leader. If you look to the top 400 universities in the world, none of them in a Muslim country. So why?
So I'm saying the same thing. I think I'm saying the same thing.
Yeah, I realize that, but I'm saying, I don't want to complicate it regarding to like the masses and the literacy and so on. No, I'm talking about the elite of the society. And even when we talk the advances of the Muslim in the past, they actually were very few also who advanced and developed the knowledge. And it's not because of the political environment. You mentioned, Ibn al-Haytham, which is Hazim. Ibn al-Haytham was prisons in Egypt. When he was in the prison, he will actually develop that concept of optics and visual perceptions. So it cannot be like a political system or other things, or even financial system. I think we have to be critical of ourselves, I mean, everybody who is now attending this meeting and is a professor on the university have to look actually in the mirror and say, did I create something that people will be using it in the future or not, or I'm just teaching? And, I include myself in this one. I'm not criticizing anybody. But I think if the more we expand the problem, the less chance we are going to solve it. I think we have to go and attack the high educational system among the Muslim world and say why they fail, not because of lack number, not lack of lack resources. Wallahu a'lam, but this is my views in this regard. And it's not, by the way, because we are focusing on the religious studies versus natural studies. Well, I mean, everybody here has studied natural sciences. So I'll leave others to speak, who probably are from the universities, can either, address, maybe there is another issues that I'm not aware of. I can tell you what is the problem with Egypt, but I cannot tell you what is the problem for other countries. Yeah.
These are very important observations. I hope every scientist and researcher takes these into consideration for further improvement and advancement, progress in that direction. So thank you very much for all these valuable comments and, in fact, suggestions. Thank you very much. Any other comment?
Question back to Imam Ghazali. I know he was for establishing the traditional Islam based on Quran and Sunnah. What was his objection to philosophical pursuits? Was that the excesses which Mu'tazila had gotten into in Mamun's time, or was he basically against any ijtihad whatsoever?
Actually, we have to take into consideration, well, this is a very important question, that why he did that, why he said that. At that time, philosophy was being projected in very loosely. For example, even today, if you talk, people think that we are talking about the philosophy that whether there's God, there is no God, things like that. This is not philosophy. This is just Zan. So people were indulging into these things, and philosophy as a subject, which is a systematic logical study, algorithm, based on algorithm, we can say, step by step. People, instead of doing this, the common people, ordinary people, they were indulging, taking philosophy too far, and in areas they were just creating mess and they were creating confusion rather than solving any problem. So it was in that perspective that he said that philosophy is not required. And he wrote a book on the refutation of philosophy. And Ibn Rushd wrote a book against it, the refutation of refutation. Then came a point when he developed differences with the court. He left his job and he became a Sufi for a time. And then one of the ministers from Central Asia, he went and pursued him. He convinced him. He came back and then he started writing against Sufism, and he again resumed teaching. And then again, the same restrictions on philosophy continued. Now that has been taken over by so many other madrasas. At that time, the madrasas of the entire empire were under him. And then now it has been taken over by all the Muslim countries. That is how the philosophy came to be banned. And then along with this came another problem of fatwa. That people, without any restriction, they were giving fatwa. And they were saying that they were muftis, they were mujtahids on the basis of ijtihad. That is why a general fatwa was given that there will be no ijtihad. Now that still continues. So these are two basic problems which hampered the thinking process in the Ummah.
Thank you.
Assalamu
alaikum.
I just have a comment. I can't even say it's an observation. But at least from where I have come, Southeast Asia, India, Pakistan, that area, when the children are in grade school and middle school and so on, the emphasis is that you have to be educated to earn a living. The earning of living is get yourself a profession. Don't just become a school teacher and study geography, for example, but go and get an education which you can then use so that you can have a suitable living. That is the basis on which many people, at least at the time that I was growing up, was stated. About 5-6 years ago, a number of us who are here went to Turkey, and we found out that the person who used to graduate at the top of the class would go into education, would become a teacher. Not an engineer, not a doctor, not a scientist, not anything but go into education so that they can improve and become good educators for the community. And unfortunately, I think that has been, at least in many of the developing countries, because they look to the West and see how things have been, is that, look, if my child can be well educated so that he or she can have a good, good living, then maybe they can do something. And by that very basis, that you get yourself educated, not for the sake, for any other sake other than make a good living, gets us less into research and more into those things that we can basically have a good living. Just a comment.
I think this is very correct, 100% correct, that we are giving, dishing out degrees for living, for earning a livelihood, not for any other purpose. You are absolutely right, and this is one of the ailments. That is why we are suffering. Our degrees are not linked to the research. They are linked to our rosy, they are linked to our livelihood.
If it is there, and by the way, we talked about Jews. I have met a number of people who are of the Jewish faith, who are going to the best universities, Harvard, Yale, and others, and their degrees are in things that nobody can think of as good for livelihood. They are getting studies in Jewish studies, for example. A person who's at the top of his class goes to Harvard and goes into Judaic studies and so on. So how can we, those of us, especially on this forum, most of us came here, many of us went to the universities here to get advanced degrees, and obviously then got into jobs. Some of them were good jobs, some of them were satisfying jobs or whatever. But how can we tell others, don't worry about livelihood, get knowledge?
Yeah.
I mean, it becomes really difficult for somebody to say, well, I've told my children that they should become technocrats and so on, but your children should not really worry about livelihood. They should just get knowledge. I'm trying to get my mind around how can we promote love of learning for learning's sake rather than for the sake of having a livelihood.
I think this is very important. This is the crux of the matter. We should all emphasize on this point that it's not just the livelihood, but if there is the education is for learning, and learning is for wisdom, and the wisdom is for solving the problems, then the economic problems are also solved as a policy. Then it should be the policy of the entire government, of entire ummah, of all the people, that we are not doing that. You are absolutely right. I think this is very crucial point. Thank you very much for this point. Any other comment? Question? I think we have a great lady here. She may take the floor if she likes. So if there is no comment coming or any question, then we may come to the conclusion.
Justice Shazad, let me make a suggestion
Yes,
here,
sir. Thank you.
and maybe for other people to consider.
Thank you.
You know, I'm still convinced that the advances of the Muslim in the past were built not on the masses, but in few who are very intelligent and elitist. And this is why you can count them, you know, assuming 500 or 1,000, whatever. So maybe the recommendation is, can we, I mean, since we are here, you know, at least in the United States and so on, people can go and pick the smartest kid that exists in some of the Muslim countries and run a test on them and basically sponsor him, because frankly, the education level here in universities is far better than any other universities that exist in the Muslim world. Then bring these, you know, 15, 20 very intelligent, you know, kids and they bring him in and supported him to go to the best universities, not to go to University of Houston or whatever. I mean, look, the elitist university here when he can really, get together with the smartest kid in the world and sponsor him for this one. And now this is when you get that super physicist and astrophysicist or, medicine and so on. So I really think we need to take and we frankly, the Muslim in the United States collects millions of dollars every year to build the Islamic facilities, masajid and so on. But we never invested the money on people, in Muslims who are very smart. And if you look to actually why the success of the Jews and the Muslim, the Jews focus their money on education. They send their kids to the best schools.
Australia.
I think you're right. You're absolutely right. I think if your recommendation is taken by the governments,
Leave some area.
Please kindly mute your mic, whosoever is speaking in between.
Again, they can't after the equipment.
Dr. Khalid Saab, kindly mute your mic. Thank you very much. I think Dr. Muhammad Salam is. I request Dr. Khalid Rizvi to kindly mute his mic.
Justice Shadadu, you actually can mute the mic for everyone. If you go to the name and right click, you can.
Yes, I can do that. I did not want to do that, but okay, I'll do this from here. I can mute it, but I think he has now muted. It appears it is, I think he has muted himself. So thank you very much, sir. I think Dr. Mamdouh Salama's suggestion is very important. And by all the Muslim governments, people, organizations, it should be adopted as a policy that merit should be rewarded. And merit should not be allowed to fail just because they have no money. Any student, any person who has shown merit, who has achieved a position, he should not be allowed to fail. For him, there should be finances, there should be arrangements, there should be all support there to take them to these universities, to these facilities where they can excel further. I think it's a very important suggestion that merit should not be allowed to fail. And we should all make an effort. There should be a collective pool that the merit must be rewarded, and they should be provided all the opportunity to excel further as a policy if it is adopted. And along with that, if it's not construed in some other manner, I may suggest humbly, along with your noble suggestion, it's very important. With that, just a humble suggestion that whenever we are building a mosque, raising funds for that, let us have a model of that mosque. What I mean by model, that when we present an idea of building a mosque, then there should be, along with the mosque, a provision in that project, in that model, a provision for a library. Library does not mean only the copies of Quran or Hadith. There should be proper library. If we cannot allow a general library, then at least we should allow a library which has textbooks, right from, say, class 1 to the university level, different subjects, that anybody who's not able to afford the books, he can actually at least have access to the textbooks or relevant books in that library of a mosque of that neighborhood. Then, along with the library, there must be a school. I'm not talking just of a madrasa, a school. And in that school, there must be Quran education, there must be Quran learning, there must be Quran related subjects of the Quran, not just only Nazara. but the education of Quran from where they draw the inspiration, and a proper education school. For example, class 1 to say class 12, schools, not just madrasas, schools which are interconnected with the education system of the country, wherever they are. And then we can have, say, a laboratory, the clinic or some other facilities. But the two important components of such a project must be there with the mosque. If anybody comes for funds, any fund is raised, then these two questions must be asked. Do you have a library? Do you have a school? And then you raise funds with open mind.
Well, this is a great recommendation, Justice Shazadu, but frankly, personally, I don't want, it's easy to make a recommendation for other people to implement, but I want to make a recommendation that we can implement, because
Yes.
I cannot control what the masjid is going to raise the money, or they will build a library or whatever. I have no control on this one, but we can raise money and establish an IQ test to go to some of these Muslim countries, and the kids in high school can compete in. And if the kid can achieve a very high level in IQ, you sponsor him to come to the best university, wherever the best university in England or the best university in the United States, and spend the, whatever. I mean, sometimes these universities now for per year, the tuition might be in the order of $100,000. And sponsor him with $100,000 for 4 years education. And after this, he can go for master and PhD degrees, and they will pay for it. You don't have to sponsor for the higher degree. I really think we can do something as individuals, not just one person, but group. And that will be really something we can achieve. And since you are our leader here, you should actually take that initiative. And we can contribute to it. And you take the leadership, going to Pakistan, going to Egypt, going to Nigeria, and do the IQ test in the best kids in high school, or even, maybe even in the middle school, and then push them to this best education. And then they become, basically the Ibn al-Haytham, can be the Razi, can Ibn Rushd, can Ibn Tufail. This is how we are going to do it. If you can have a 10,000 Muslims who are the world-renowned specialists in their field, who are researchers, developing technology and developing science, I think you will have achieved the goal that we want. And I'm not talking about the millions. And that will be the trouble with it, that obviously they will stay here in the United States, but that's fine. They still can give, the science now, the world now is just an open village, so they can contribute anywhere. So, wallah, it's a recommendation for you, Justice Shazadu, that you are our leader, and then you can implement it. So I fulfilled my mission by making a recommendation for you.
So you always humble me, and you know my views on the subject. While I appreciate this proposal and highly appreciate it, and you know that what is my recommendation always, what has been my recommendation always, that you kindly take it over, lead us, and we are with you. And I have always been recommending and requesting you to kindly lead us. Only you can do this job.
Inshallah, we can work together on it. Maybe you can frame it in the right way and see how it is. And alhamdulillah, we might have professors in so many countries that we know, they can actually do that evaluation for us, and we can do it this way. So inshallah, we'll do something.
This is a very valuable suggestion. Very valuable. Practical.
But may Allah reward you for the subject, because you are the one who brought the suggestion in my mind anyway. So jazakallah.